Hello, everyone. My name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff that is happening throughout the world tonight as we review the last 48 hours of the top breaking news stories from across the globe and from our sources. And whether you're talking about the war in Ukraine, you're talking about what's happening in the Horn of Africa, places like Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, or whether you're talking about Southeast Asia, South America, Central America, or of course North America, and some of the more domestic efforts ongoing there. Now, generally speaking, what makes the news is not good things. Big geopolitical events are usually not a good thing. It's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of conflicts. There's a lot of war. There's a lot of a lot of terrorism throughout the world, natural disasters, and famines and things like this that are causing a tremendous amount of people to suffer. Every single one of these points, essentially every single night, is a large group of people suffering. For instance, every 4 seconds, somebody dies from starvation, and these streams go on for 2.5, 3 hours, and it's haunting to think about the number that is. And the same thing, every 1 minute, a child goes into a state of severe malnutrition, life-threatening malnutrition. And so, once again, it's haunting to think about those figures as we go through these news streams every single night. But luckily, here at the New News, the point is to inform you about these things, to let you know what's happening around the world, what is affecting people, and give you an opportunity to help us be the news that gives back. And the way that we're able to do that is through the links in the description. A ton of those organizations, all of those organizations, in fact, are all vetted, have gone through the vetting process with us here at TNM. And one of the things we make sure is that 70% or more of the donations that these organizations do end up receiving end up going through, end up going and actually doing good things. They go to their programs. The 30% or less, with a very big emphasis on or less, going to things like salaries and administration's costs. So a lot of good being done through those organizations, a lot of wonderful organizations down there, everything from supporting the war efforts and humanitarian efforts for the Ukrainians there, or whether you're talking about different humanitarian efforts ongoing throughout the globe, regardless of what you're talking about. So always a way to give back to the very same news stories, and we always implore our viewers to please do so. And if you have more organizations, please get in contact with the staff member either through our Discord or on our official website through our information there. And please let us know. Give us the name of the organization, a link to them, and a little bit about what they do. We want to get more organizations vetted. We want to fill that description. We don't want to have any characters left to be able to use with nothing but organizations to help people. And at some point, hopefully, be able to put fundraisers on every single stream that we do here. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. One of the biggest things you can do is help us grow this channel. The more people that come here, the more people that are watching this are becoming informed about the situation, have the chance to give back, the more people that will. And so we can have, as a community, a nice impact on what's happening in the world around us and the people that are affected by these very news stories. And so that like and subscribe, helping out the channel, sharing it amongst your communities really does us a lot here. Really does a lot of good for us here, and really helps out the channel. And I appreciate all the support you guys have already given us. Now, before we jump into the news, a lot of people tend to have questions, especially when it comes to the conflict side of things, because a lot of people don't know a whole lot about this stuff. It's definitely talked about in the movies and stuff, but a lot of it just isn't the real world facts regarding it. And so if you have any questions and you are joining us live tonight, please feel free to ask questions in our live chat. Please always ask questions. I will answer as many as I physically can going through these streams, trying to break things down for you guys. If you are new here, to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I served as an 0352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and I did 2 tours to the Middle East. I did 2 combat deployments. My first deployment to the Middle East was between October of 2017 and March 2018, and during that time, I was there with Operation Inherent Resolve and served in the country of Syria for roughly 4.5 months of that 6-month tour. There, I was providing anti-armor support, as well as I was directly attached to Special Operations Forces, including Green Berets, SEALs, and of course coalition partners, including the SAS and Royal Marines there inside of Syria, fighting the Islamic State and assisting our SDF partners there in stabilization efforts in the northeastern part of the country, mostly Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces. After that, came back to the United States. I actually took up a B billet, which is a job, and that's not part of my main MOS or occupational specialty. And there I was in charge of the company armory for about 2.5 years as the non-commissioned officer in charge. After that, I redeployed back to the Middle East between October of 2019 through March of 2020, and I was the Javelin team leader with the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait, where I spent the majority of my time before New Year's of 2020, when I was actually called to and was one of the 100 Marines that responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex, secured the Baghdad Embassy after it was attacked by over 4,000 protesters and Katiba Hezbollah militants, and provided all anti-armor and was overseeing all anti-armor operations of the Baghdad Embassy complex during my month and a half there, before rotating down into the Red Sea and training Saudi Arabian Marines preparing to deploy as part of the coalition to Yemen. And so, I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, and a CLS or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I do have extensive medical training on top of what most Marines will receive in order to assist Navy corpsmen in their jobs. And then I do have battlefield and real-world experience providing aid to casualties there during my time in the Middle East. So outside of that, I try to remain very well-rounded. I have a lot of interest in things like geopolitics, human geography, science, history, that kind of stuff, but I claim not to be an expert in any of them. And that's fine, because if I'm an expert or not, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you, as a viewer, do your own research, which is why on our website, the link's in the description, our daily maps are archived clear back to the beginning when we started the channel there back in last March, and we are able to provide our sources and everything for you guys here on this channel. You can go through, it's up before every single stream, so this one is live on there now, and you can check that out, and you can click through everything there and go to any of the associated articles that we may post there from other more large news agencies that are also talking about this story, but also to our actual sources from the videos that we're going to show you. And with that, we can now move into the news here. We already have a question. Not to deal with the news. See, someone's been watching Battle Los Angeles, Booking 40. Very good movie, very interesting movie. Not good for all the right reasons, but it definitely gives a depiction, I think, that I wouldn't say does complete justice, but at least is a lot more interesting than most depictions of a war movie, that's for sure. Book of 40 asks, so how many unauthorized discharges of weapons of a weapon did you witness? Scary as shit when it happens next to you. I actually had a buddy I went to high school with, and we were in the exact same unit. I graduated with him. He actually conducted an ND or a negligent discharge of his weapon system, of his rifle, while cleaning it in Iraq. And then we had, I had one instance when we were in our fire base there in Syria, and one of the SDF, one of the local Kurdish forces that we were there with, had a negligent discharge right next on a post that was sitting right next to our main operations center there, and he accidentally ended up actually injuring himself. He did shoot himself on accident, and we provided aid to him and everything, but not so much negligent discharges, very few. I've had some very I can't really think of a whole lot of times I've seen negligent discharge. I've seen a lot of scary things happen with weapon systems when they've gone wrong. I've seen tow missiles skip off of the ground thanks to LAR not knowing what they're doing, and I've seen the Moz or the M3 Carl Gustav. We fired a HEDP round into a berm and later found it with a 50 cal when it then detonated after we shot it, but that's about as crazy. Nah, I wouldn't say that's the craziest, but that's definitely up there of things that I've seen. But very few actual NDs. I was very, very fortunate not to have a lot of those, and those guys usually aren't trusted to ever be able to do that again, at least in the Marine Corps. And so with that, we actually roll into the news here. I hope that answered your question, and we get to jump down here into the main story of the night, which is, of course, coming out of Ukraine. And the first thing we have, unfortunately, as always, we have that war crime and child casualty update that's coming from the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office. And they say, quote, Russian war crime statistics for the past week from January 27th up until February the 3rd. 1,348 new crimes have been registered. At least 459 Ukrainian children killed and 919 injured. And they say in parentheses, the data without full consideration of places of active hostility. So places like Bakhmut, places around Soledar, that whole sector in the Donetsk front that is currently in battle. They cannot get accurate representations of what's happening there, and it does not take that into full account. And something else that came out is, quote, since February 24th, 2022, the representatives of the National Police of Ukraine have received 9,631 appeals related to the disappearance of 9,764 Ukrainian children. That's coming from Yaroslav Shenko, who is the deputy head of the Juvenile Prevention Directorate of the National Police of Ukraine. And that is talking about the roughly 14,000 children that have been forcefully deported to Russia. And we can actually take a look at here at those actual war crimes updates here and those child casualty updates. This is coming from the official Twitter of the General Prosecutor's Office there in Ukraine. So in total, they're looking at 67,838 crimes of aggression and war crimes. This is under international law. Crimes against national security is based off of their law as well. That's accounting for 16,986 crimes, with, once again, 459 children killed and 919 which were wounded. But a really big story that's continued to roll throughout this past about a week and a half now is the fact that the Ukrainian government, the SBU, the SSU, and the National Police of Ukraine, and of course the executive office with President Zelensky, is really bringing the hammer down on corruption and things like that. That has always plagued the country of Ukraine since it gained its independence from the USSR in 1991. This is the reason for the Maidan Revolution in 2014, and this is some of these efforts are the reason why they were actually accepted into the EU as a candidate state and continue to see good relations continue to build. And it's because, yes, do these things leave a mark on Ukraine? Certainly. But being public about them, certainly, I think, is doing it justice. And that's what we're seeing them do now. The SBU and the SSU of Ukraine continue to crack down on those corruption scandals. Investigations over the past several months now have now culminated into a sweeping arrests and investigations being launched. And they're being made against former and current officials of the Ukrainian government, as well as top executives in key industries related to some of these crimes, including the largest oil-producing company in the country of Ukraine, Ukronafta. And officials in the Ministry of Defense were arrested for embezzling funds earmarked for constructing a barracks. The former head of the Kherson Regional Administration was formally served an investigation notice. Meanwhile, another SBU detachment raided a customs office, arresting the staff regarding a scheme of large-scale corruption, which we are expecting for more information to follow suit on that. They did release a video. Not even the military itself has been kept safe. In fact, the military medical teams there and the staff there inside of Kyiv for the high-ranking levels of that medical team were actually arrested as well. They were accused of accepting bribes from what they call evaders, which are individuals who are meant to be conscripted, if you remember, to the very beginning of the war, they closed the country to all fighting-age males in the event that they needed to do mass mobilization in response to this. This is something that Ukraine has yet to do, but continues to crack down on because that is still in place. And those individuals, so they actually accepted bribes to keep those individuals who may be called up for conscription in order to allow them to evade conscription because of, fake medical documentation and what have you, saying that they are unfit for service. Coming from the Security Services of Ukraine, released a ton of photographs of different raids coming out of investigations ongoing against these officials. And when I mean a ton, I mean an absolute ton. You can just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. former head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration. This is the raid on the customs office coming from the Ukrainian SSU. Of course, they're going to put a bunch of music to it, but as we can see here, they just roll up into this office and immediately begin arresting everyone here. So this is a customs office. So very much a sweeping crackdown on the corruption. A lot of this was embezzlement. I'm talking millions of dollars worth of embezzlement. And from what we've been able to find and read and hear about regarding these investigations is these investigations have been going on for a long time. This has not been something that has just, all of a sudden happened. What we're seeing now is the effects of these investigations. These individuals are essentially going, hey, these investigations are basically now leading up, they're culminating in these arrests. These are something that's been going on for years now. So, and there's just a ton of them. There's too many to really go through here on this stream. It would take way too much time, but there are a ton of sweeping. Everything from buying food for the military, humanitarian aid, so humanitarian fraud, embezzlement for the embezzlement of government officials, military officials, heads of different major corporations, just a ton of stuff. Book of 40 has a very general question because he's regarding the Battle Los Angeles movie he just watched. About that movie, do Marines always address staff sergeants instead of just sergeants? In the U.S. Air Force, every NCO is just a sergeant. Hell yes, we do. If you ever just call somebody by just sergeant or sarge or whatever, you will be so screwed up. You will be, I guess officially hazing isn't a thing in the Marine Corps, but that would be something that I could see a staff NCO lose his mind over. That's for sure. Yes. It is so difficult sometimes too, because we wear our rank insignias that we wear they're black. They're supposed to be tactical. So that way they don't shine in the field. And when you have someone that has, they're just a full stack, like a master guns or something, it is very difficult sometimes to go to figure out. You're sitting there and he's like, is that a first sergeant, a master guns? I don't know who this guy is. Is it a master sergeant? Like, who is he? So it can be very difficult, but yes. And that's because not every NCO every NCO for other branches is E5 or higher. In the Marine Corps, it's actually E4. So I was a corporal. So I was an E4 in the Marine Corps, and I am a junior non-commissioned officer. So in the Marine Corps. So that is how that goes. Sergeants are technically still a junior non-commissioned officer, but they definitely are definitely a bigger scale up, because you're talking about team lead as a team, or a vehicle leader as a corporal, and you're talking about like a squad leader or a section leader as a sergeant. And also, if need be, then also acting platoon sergeant and things like that. If the platoon sergeant just isn't there, is KIA, wounded in action, what have you, or just has some issues. So yes, you always address them by their actual rank. It is a big thing in the Marine Corps. It is a huge thing in the Marine Corps, and it is a huge respect thing. But it is, there is no abbreviation in the Marine Corps. Riley says, grunts always annoy me because y'all's ranks were always shiny and made me think you were an officer. That's because I actually did a job, which means I was always in the field, which means they always get chipped. And the way that you fix that is with a black Sharpie, but if you actually know what you're doing, you can actually tell what that is. And so you can swiftly and fairly correct your junior Marines. The EU ended up sending a delegation here to visit Ukraine. European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen met with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The EU president announced that a 10th sanction package against Russia is planning to be released on February the 24th, marking 1 year. The International Center for Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression in Ukraine would be set up in The Hague to coordinate the collection of evidence of war crimes. They are talking about setting up an independent tribunal of Russian war crimes, similar to that of the Nuremberg trials. Being officially released by President Zelensky.
You know it's the European.
Yes.
So as you can see, obviously, very good conference. Always a very good conference. They're definitely, and once again, things like the corruption arrests and everything isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it's something that the EU actually had a lot of debate over when it came to Ukraine's candidacy, and it definitely shows. You can see that relationship has grown. In fact, a lot of these corruption measures being put in place are because they have aligned their law with the EU's. They have been passing legislation in the Verkhovna Rada continuously. I mean, hundreds of laws in some cases, regarding corruption and shifting their policy to meet EU standard, which is and be in line with the EU, which is what's causing some of these shifts. Definitely, I think helping in the long run here.
Morning.
How are you?
Hello.
All good?
Not bad. Yeah, but during the Second World War, and it was dealing with
So, I am a citizen. I want to have another life job. What do I do?
We have several.
Yeah, here you have them. Wonderful. Way.
Дуже
the energy saving.
енергоефективна. Це
Very
скільки
good.
енергії заощаджує?
It's the best that is
7
possible.
times.
Це
So, good luck. Yes.
удачі.
Thank you. Thank you for having shown me.
Дякуємо, що показали, як це робиться.
Just doing the normal, going around, taking a tour, kind of ordeal, and this kind of goes for every delegation that's coming through. But that does wrap up what's happening there in the capital of Kyiv, and we now get to transition into what's happening there on the front lines as we move over here and into the Donbass. And as you can see, there's quite a few things happening, especially around this sector. The first thing that we have is actually over here in the Kharkiv Oblast, and this is where in the city of Barvenkovo, 2 people were killed and 1 person was injured after an S-300 missile ended up striking a local house as well as a local school there. As you can see, absolutely devastates it. There is no... You have to imagine, considering explosives, when they go off, they go up and out. They usually do. It's very difficult to make a crater. That's why militaries make shape charges called cratering charges to do that in order to make runways unusable and things like that. It takes an immense amount of explosive firepower to dig a large crater. And so that really should illustrate just how large that crater is and just how obliterated that house is. There is no house. There is just a pile of splintered wood left. And that is the reality. Just how large the S-300, how devastating that is. We're seeing these things fired into major civilian populations. For instance, over here in Kramatorsk. Now, the search and rescue in Kramatorsk has officially come to an end. Quote, the search and rescue operation at the ruins of the house in Kramatorsk, which was destroyed by Russians the day before yesterday, so on the 1st, has ended. The body of a dead woman was recovered from the rubble. The number of victims increased to 4 dead and 18 wounded. 2 people were successfully rescued. Buried underneath the rubble, it could be people could be heard very well into the night on the 2nd, as they were very deep into that rubble. And first responders continue to sift through that debris to find them. And we can't see that official announcement coming from Pavel Kolenko's official Twitter, regarding the end of those search and rescue operations. You can see the absolute devastation. This is an Iskander-M missile, which ended up impacting this, is what, according to Ukraine, is an Iskander-M ballistic missile, which ended up impacting this residential building and completely annihilated it. And I mean, hundreds of rescue workers were working through the nights, the last several nights, trying to reach these individuals. You see, once again, that bird's eye view really shows you that devastation and the power behind those explosives. Coming from Elena Zelenska. And while that search and rescue operation was ongoing, Russian artillery struck downtown Kramatorsk again. At least 6 people were injured, and at least 18 apartment buildings and 2 medical facilities were damaged. This is called a double tap. This is something that the Russians and the Assad regime forces under their command also did in Syria, specifically to target the white helmets, who were the first responders there in those devastating strikes in the city. These double taps, we've also shown firsthand their effects in places such as Kharkiv as well, and this is archived several months ago when this was happening. So now, this is called a double tap. The purpose of this, knowing that there's a large amount of people that are working in and around this area, is to try and injure first responders. You give them time then to feel safe to come out, and then to try to assist, the wounded, the injured, and then you hit them again with artillery in roughly the same area. And that's meant to take out first responders particularly. But again, you can see the devastation from these. That leads us to our daily Donetsk update, the latest one coming from Pavel Kolenko. Quote, on February 2nd, number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 1 killed, 8 injured. And he does release that graphic. This is coming out from 8 a.m. local time this morning, and 1 person was killed and 6 injured in Kramatorsk, like we have already talked about, and 2 people were injured in Bakhmut, which is still embattled. So far, since February the 24th of last year, 1,343 people have been killed, with an additional 2,969 having been injured. Now, this does not include places such as Volnovakha, Donetsk, Shakhtarsk, or any of these other locations, Mariupol, where images from Maxar satellites, analyses of these images from Maxar satellite footage around Mariupol shows tens of thousands of civilians having been killed. So we know that that these numbers are significantly higher, but these are the numbers that the Ukrainians at least are able to confirm. Here to the north of the city of Bakhmut, here on the front line, the village of Mykolaievka was effectively captured by the Wagner Group. Yet another small village. There are 3 villages called Mykolaievka in the Donetsk Oblast. One is in Ukrainian-held territory. The other is in Russian-held territory. This one didn't even pop up, so I'm impressed we found it. But this is the village of Mykolaievka. This is to the north. This is over right next to Sako Vanseti, which was captured as of the last stream by the Wagner Group. It had a whole population of 3 people. This Mykolaievka does not have a much bigger one. Not a very big gain in ground for the Russian forces. This is coming from the Wagner Group, but it definitely shows the issues that the Ukrainians are coming into with their northern line at this point still kind of in that collapsing state. We don't know if at this point these 2 settlements, not really worth the strategic value into defending them, were actually just kind of relinquished in a tactical withdrawal, or if there was heavy fighting over these. Regardless, they are still now in Russian hands. Once again, coming from the PMC Wagner Group, personal hatred towards them from my side of things. But regardless, we can see here them proudly posing with their flag and a guitar for whatever reason. Not something I would want to lug around on a patrol, but still.
Вагнер рулит! Николаевка наша, парни!
So a small victory for the Wagner Group there on the northern sector of the front. As we come down here into Bakhmut itself, Bakhmut still continues to be embattled. Russian forces pressing their offensives on the outskirts of the city. The city continues to hold back the Russian army at this point. Human wave attacks against Ukrainian defensive lines have left fields around the city littered with corpses. It is quite literally a sea of bodies. Continuous shelling attempts to destroy whatever is left of the city. 2 foreign volunteers from Norway were reported to have been killed after they had loaded wounded onto one of their vehicles, and at which point a artillery piece scored a direct impact on the vehicle, killing all involved. While yesterday, an American volunteer is reported to have been killed during the fighting, though no further details were actually provided. That volunteer was reportedly operating in a medic capacity.
Кулеметник до мене один. Шейка перекриваєш.
Йобаний дрон!
Треба зачистити цей будинок. Тримай. Крию.
Блядь, спалили нас, кажется.
Блядь, там чути звук підеру. Ходять без броніків, повний рост, ну там ще беспокойтесь.
Мы прям по ним пешком шли. Да.
So as you can see, it's really, you're looking at, squad minus, team plus size elements really going out and doing the basic, very small unit leadership tactic endeavors here, as they're trying to repulse these much larger wave attacks. And right now it's suspected that there are about, and I do say there are about, as of the last report we got, 25,000 Ukrainian troops or so in the Bakhmut sector, against roughly 30 to 35,000 Russian troops. And they're using wave-style attacks, massive attacks, 20 plus to over 100 plus troops in a single attack, being literally crossing open ground directly into directly into Ukrainian fire. And it has turned into very devastating results, even using these small unit tactics. But you're seeing them, they get dropped off on an APC, they immediately leave. And it is way too graphic to show here on video, but we do have the immediate aftermath of the direct hit on the Norwegian volunteers video there. And it really speaks quite to the brutality of the war, and to the brutality of what's happening around Bakhmut. Obviously, makes are never safe, but indiscriminate bombardments like this make it impossible to distinguish between friend or foe, or something that is or is not considered a valid military target, and disregards any protections that they may have, which is why indiscriminate bombardments, according to the Additional Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Convention, are prohibited. And they're prohibited under the 1949 Geneva Convention themselves, as well as granting protection to individuals conducting medical duties. We come down here into Toretsk, which lies along a very major MSR here, coming from out of around Horlivka up through Toretsk, and up in here into Kostanivka, clear up into Kramatorsk, the de facto head of government there. This is one of the suspected lines of advance for Russian forces, but they seem to have focused there on Bakhmut. But Toretsk was shelled once again, killing at least one person and leaving another 6 wounded. From Come Back Alive, one of the longest running humanitarian organizations, or I say humanitarian, they provide non-lethal aid to Ukrainians. To Ukrainian troops. They have since 2014. Very trustworthy organization. In English is Back Alive, but it's Come Back Alive. You can actually donate to them in the description. This is some of the photos that they have coming from here. And likewise, once again, Pavel Krylenko, who's constantly reporting on this. He's reporting on what's happening to his people there in his region of control. And we can see here the crumpled up remains of the shelling. I mean, this is a gaming cafe, and it's just been obliterated. No military value whatsoever. So, a couple questions coming through here. And comments. Book and 40 regarding the EU delegation says, interesting how some EU leaders, women, are more steadfast in their support of Ukraine than others, men. Yeah, there's definitely an interesting geopolitical thing that you could probably take a look at there, but I don't think that this is really the place to do it. At least for us to do that, because I don't know enough about European politics in depth to talk intelligently, just from an outsider's perspective, being an American myself. But there's definitely, you can see some things, definitely some cracks forming in some ways, but definitely cracks I think have already been there for a long time, or now just becoming exacerbated. Rooster Redbeard, used to be Rooster Sideburns, has stated, why hasn't Ukraine made any big pushes to take new land lately? Why, you think? Well, that's the thing. I think that it's partially because, well, I mean, Ukraine has pretty clearly stated, we need more equipment. We need more armored vehicles specifically, but we need heavier equipment, better equipment, really to launch an offensive that's going to be able to seize more ground, because taking ground is a double-edged sword. Taking ground is a double-edged sword because while this major success here in the Kharkiv Oblast was, of course, a great success for taking and retaking and liberating, the ground, you have now shortened the entirety of how much the enemy has to defend. Same thing with Kherson. They were super overextended here, which isn't good, which didn't put them in a good position. And you push them back clear to the Dnipro. Relatively a good thing in the big scale things, but you've really shortened up, because just like it won't take Ukraine a lot of troops to cover the Dnipro River, something already difficult to cross, it doesn't take a lot of Russian troops to do the same. So they can now transfer the majority of concentrations of troops they had here and push it over to Donetsk in order to put it into the meat grinder that is Bakhmut, or put them down here along this border. So you make it increasingly difficult. The less area that your enemy has to defend, the better defended it's going to be. And that's kind of what you're seeing here as this war develops. Is not only are you looking at World War I style tactics at this point because of the deadliness of the warfare, but you're also seeing how Russian troops are becoming increasingly concentrated because they have less and less land that they have to hold. They have to defend against. They have to, so it's like stretching out a rubber band and then putting it back together. And, once it's really stretched out, it becomes very easy to snap it. But when you have it, the more lax that line is, the less stretched out it is. It becomes increasingly harder and harder to snap that. You have to cut it. And Rooster follows up, but when you take back land, don't you also degrade their military? Yes, but that is true. But we've also seen the Russian military degraded quite extensively throughout the entirety of the war, suffering from a massive amount of really lack of morale. And also their best forces have been destroyed, long been destroyed. Their best equipment long been destroyed, with very few T90Ms and T90 any variant, scattered throughout the forces, mostly relying now on late or early upgrade models, Soviet era upgrades to the T-72, and also just plain old T-62s. How we even have a photo evidence of a T-34 that they took off of a monument in Lysychansk and put it at a roadblock. So they're not going for a quality perspective like Western military supplies is. They're going with the supposed quote to Stalin, because it's never been proven, that quantity has a quality all of its own. And that really kind of shows you the mentality behind the wave style attacks and everything. Using up population is considering the majority of the Wagner group is being recruited. In some cases, some reports indicating over 90% of the Wagner group being recruited from prison populations. It's not something that Russia would necessarily see as a loss. And they can move massive and put massive amounts of men and material into this battle space because they made massive numbers of the T-72. To the point they left entire fields of them rusting out when the USSR collapsed. Right there at the factories. Never to be used. Same thing with, elsewhere inside of Russia. They have massive numbers of vehicles. Many of them will require extensive work, but they have them, and it's not necessarily good, it's just good enough. T-34 is rolling off the assembly line, in some cases have such a big gaps in their armor, you can actually stick your finger through the armor plating and into the crew compartments in some places. But that's the mentality of the Russian. That is the mentality of the Russians. They can't necessarily support that type of a war effort now, considering they don't have the backing of the Allies from Lend-Lease, but that is their mentality nonetheless. And that really, you have to look at the mentality, what they're kind of looking back on what they've done in the past to really see and give some kind of credibility as to why they're doing it now, even if it doesn't supposedly work. Now, as to why Ukraine hasn't taken any land lately, getting back to that major point, is it worth it? Bookham 40, asked the question, is Ukraine holding back for a better opportunity? And yeah, so it's possible to have launched an offensive. It's still possible. It's cold enough to launch an offensive. The ground is hard. The Rasputitsa hasn't hit quite yet again. But is it going to get enough ground to really do anything? And that's the really big question. That's a question that I don't think anyone has. And what we're seeing at this point is really probably setting the conditions for a major counteroffensive, getting those supplies, getting that training and everything that their crews need, getting those NATO forces built up. We know that they're building entire new brigades at this point and refitting them, probably for that very reason, because it's getting right. If you remember the conditions at the beginning of the war, they were so bad, Russian forces got bogged down. But at this point, you're looking at those conditions starting very shortly. So why would you waste trying to maneuver your forces for them to get immediately caught up in the Rasputitsa again? Let the Russians make that mistake. The Ukrainians know their soil. They know their own homeland. They know where to fight. They know how to fight. They just need the equipment to do it, and they just need the timing. Timing is everything, and they're setting their conditions now, and I think a lot of the aid packages and stuff that we're getting ready to go talk about here in the international news is probably gearing up for that. And so have been the last few aid packages we've seen from Europe, including the large amounts of Abrams and main battle tank, or the Abrams, the Challenger 2s, the Leopard 2s, as well as plenty of the the Bradleys and everything are probably preparing for that, as well as the massive amount of troops that will be trained between now and a springtime offensive. So that is my opinion. Ken Brown jumping the gun here on some of the news. We will get to that. We will get to that, Ken, for you here once we get to our international news and into North America. We do have some stuff on that. Down here in Marinka, though, which is on the southern end of the city of Donetsk, it's the area of Donetsk. It's a suburb of it. We can see that Russian forces continue to assault the city of Marinka. We've seen increasing amounts of kinetic action here around Marinka itself, as well as other locations, including Volodar, suggesting that Russian forces are trying to make breakthroughs in other locations. Now, it's very important that Ukrainian forces hold the city of Marinka, despite it not having really any strategic, any tactical value at this point, I should say, being completely destroyed. But what you're looking at is the fact that if you lose Marinka, it puts artillery systems that are now, within possible striking distance of Russian forces that are able to provide those precision fires on logistical hubs and troop concentrations and things around the city of Donetsk, which serves as a huge head of government for head of government for them, head of the military forces there for the Russians there. It's a very key location. A lot of logistics, a lot of repair centers, a lot of ammunition storage, fuel, troop concentrations, building areas, VIPs, things like that, command control centers. So that is the purpose of holding Marinka, maintaining that pressure on Donetsk. And we can see here some of those volunteer forces around here in the trench lines. You see they've refortified them with HESCO barriers. Just trying to hold down there on the outskirts of the city. And this was a very striking video. This is actually what we took the thumbnail for tonight's video from. And this shows you not just the destruction, because we've already covered that before. Marinka is pounded into dust. There is nothing left. It is more destroyed, dare I say, than Mariupol was. It has been under constant shelling since the beginning of the war, since February the 24th. And this shows you the type of shelling. This is nothing but a photo. This is nothing but a video of war crimes. It's 4 minutes long. It's 3 minutes and 53 seconds long. You see explosions from artillery here. This is artillery, high explosive artillery rounds impacting on the surface, on these buildings, just leveling them. But what you see in the back right here, and what you see here and here, that is incendiary munitions. That is the 9S22M, which is a 122 millimeter Katyusha dumbfire rocket that carries incendiary hexagonal pellets inside of it that burn at thousands of degrees. Using incendiary munitions, whether air delivered or otherwise, violates the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, Additional Protocol 3, on any civilian population center. On any. Whether people, infrastructure, homes, doesn't matter. It violates it. It's clear, very specific. It is the shortest protocol out of all of them in the entire CCW. To which Russia is a major signatory to. Meaning they are one of the major leading countries in signing that convention and bringing it into effect. Same thing. Indiscriminate shelling and bombardment. Additional Protocol 1, 1949 Geneva Conventions. Also, the 1949 Geneva Conventions themselves. Using it systematically, as we've seen with incendiary munitions, indiscriminate bombardment, under the 1993 Rome Statute, that is a crime against humanity. There are too many instances at this point throughout the duration of this war where these types of tactics have been done. Incendiary munitions, indiscriminate bombardment, especially. These two, I would say, more than any of the others, despite this, it's just aside from the general war crimes committed by individual troops on the ground, really show nothing but war crime. It is a video of war crimes. Just nothing but. Need I say more? Now, there are certain weapon systems with incendiary value, or that have incendiary capability, that are still permitted under the convention. You can see a tank right here. There's a tank that's engaging this building here. That was an artillery piece. You can actually see some of the tank fire coming through here. But the things like white phosphorus is permitted to be used because it produces a very thick white smoke cloud that can be used to obscure observation. That is the point of white phosphorus, also known affectionately as Willie Pete or Willie Peter. It's used by artillery. It's used by mortars. Kind of falls in the same category though, in order to provide heavy amounts of smoke screen. Toxic, noxious gases, but it's not designated as a chemical weapon. But white phosphorus, Willie Pete, does burn at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so it cannot be used in order to engage a target. That is how the CCW actually looks at white phosphorus and similar munitions. The 9S22M does not do that. The 9S22M is meant for offensive operations. It's meant as an offensive means, an offensive type of weapon system or munition that is meant to engage targets. The usage of it on personnel, by the way, actually violates rule number 85 of international humanitarian law, which means that you cannot use incendiary munitions of any kind in order to render an individual hors de combat, which is the term that is used there, meaning no longer combat effective or no longer a combatant, someone too severely wounded to still fight. You can see there just the absolute disregard and destruction of Marinka. There's complete disregard for like human rights or just morality, I would say, in general. Coming down here to Mariupol, explosions actually rocked the city of Mariupol. So explosions reportedly thundered from around the port area of Mariupol, which according to local residents was serving as a logistical hub for Russian forces. It was shortly reported there afterwards by locals as well that air defenses were operating around the city after sirens began to go off, located from different Russian-built buildings throughout the city.
О, видишь, как разгорелось. Называйте, пожалуйста.
As we continue over here, the yellow ribbon has begun to pop up. Pro-Ukrainian graffiti, including symbols of resistance to the Ukrainian people, has appeared in occupied territories. The movement was started by the Yellow Ribbon Civil Resistance Movement. The Ukrainian alphabet I, which is pronounced Yi, which is unique to Ukrainian and does not exist in other Slavic languages, became a symbol of Ukrainians' resistance in occupied areas. Yi is returning to Crimea. And these are photos of the yellow ribbon, which has been popping up in areas under occupation. So you can see, very small. These are very small things, but this is how resistance movements work. Small notions, small pamphlets. And so this is the yellow ribbon movement. And we can see that resistance is paying off as we come over to Enahadar, where a car ended up exploding in Enahadar. In confirmed partisan activity, confirmed right before the stream started, a car exploded in downtown Enahadar, home of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, or the ZNPP. Reportedly, the victim was Yevhen Kuzmin, who is a local Russian collaborator who worked with the occupational police. Russian forces have reportedly begun anti-terrorism measures throughout the city, cracking down on pro-Ukrainian sentiments and attempting to weed out partisans. Russian news media claim that there were no casualties and that the target was a local businesswoman. And we can see here some of that immediate aftermath. Reportedly, he was driving when it detonated. Once again, more of that firefighter. And so there's some of that crackdown that we're seeing. We're seeing increased amount of checkpoint activity around Enahadar. But these are Ukrainian partisans who are taking the responsibility for the action there. So this came out right before our stream started. This is where we found the confirmation.
Пламенный привет всем предателям украинскому народу. Сегодня был ликвидирован предатель и бывший сотрудник полиции Евгений Кузьмин, 1992 года рождения. Мы, партизаны Энергодара, продолжаем бороться с оккупантами до последнего. Мы знаем у вас все. Где вы живете, что вы едите и куда ходите в туалет. Каждый из вас будет найден и ликвидирован не менее жестоко, чем Кузьмин. Слава Украине!
And we have seen where partisan movements have been very successful. It was very well documented, actually, inside of the Kherson Oblast, where partisans were very successful in being able to provide the coordinates for precision, HIMARS, artillery fire, and completely just annihilating the communications arrays there, killing Russian forces while they're out on patrols and onesies and twosies, and when they were staggering back to their building area, while drunk after spending too much at a local bar, and also just conducting a lot of psyops there, but a lot of intelligence gathering, a lot of killing off of collaborators, just a lot of different activity, and they were able to be the first ones to raise the Ukrainian flag over the recently deoccupied city of Kherson. Before Ukrainian troops even arrived, they had already climbed on top of the building and raised the Ukrainian flag high, so that way Ukrainian troops were greeted well when they got there. So partisan activity can be very successful, and we're starting to see it pick up in the Zaporizhia, the Zaporizhia Oblast, as well as still continuing there in Kherson and elsewhere. But RIA, which is a Russian government-run news media site, actually also stated on this and also talked on this, once again saying that there were no casualties reported. While in Kherson, a Russian artillery ended up striking a fireworks warehouse. So there was an abandoned fireworks warehouse on the edge of the city that was struck by Russian artillery as it continues to bombard the city almost daily. And it started a very large fire. So you can see kind of the beginning of the fire here.
Ночні прильоти від орків влучили в епіцентр. Попали в склад з феєрверками, петардами. Вигоріли торгівельні зали. Наразі працюють ДСНС. Ночні
Coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you can see coming from inside that warehouse. But that is everything inside of the country of Ukraine, but that's not everything that we have on the news here. Don't worry, I see Aravis is saying need someone to educate me about those balloons. Don't worry, we will get to those balloons here once we get to the big international news. And we actually had a question come in. Rooster Redbeard asks, any new tanks spotted in Ukraine yet? That is a negative. Those vehicles still require training, and so while they are on their way, especially as we saw for the M2A2 Bradleys, the ODS ones, we are going to be seeing a lot of training ongoing. We already know that they are conducting training with NATO assets that are already inside of Europe, but we will see more training here in the future before those are actually properly handed over. As for the actual tanks, such as the Abrams will take some time to make. The Lima, it's located there in Lima or Lima, depending on how you want to call it. In Ohio, it's the Lima Tank Factory. In that area, that is where General Dynamics actually produces the Abrams tank. They build about 11 of them a month. But Ukraine will be receiving brand new Abrams tanks. Brand new Abrams tanks. They have to be built. So they're saying that those won't hit the battlefield for a couple of months now, obviously. And there's some things that they have to change in the Abrams in order to be able to give them the exported version of those. They can't just give them the American ones, and I found out why. It's because some of the armor components inside of the Abrams apparently includes depleted uranium. So they have to switch it out for another non-nuclear substance, because nuclear materials are obviously controlled not just by the United States, but by a lot of international conventions. So that is why. But we get ready to roll right into the international news here. And of course, we start off in Belgorod, where a fire at an oil depot was spotted. Another fire has been reported at the local Belgorod oil depot. Belgorod serves as a vital hub for Russian military supply chain. Losses of large amounts of oil supplies could be very detrimental to the very anticipated Russian spring offensive.
успокойся, блядь. Это не первый раз. Вы первый раз проспали, блядь.
Це третій.
Ну, а когда был рядом где-то взрыв?
Алло.
We can have a couple of photos here that can show you the nice bright glow from that blaze. Meanwhile, in Volgograd, sits right here on the Volga River, Russia ended up commemorating the end of the Battle of Stalingrad. Volgograd is Stalingrad. It was renamed in the de-Stalinization process. This is the Battle of Stalingrad, which is the most deadly battle ever fought in human history, which included over 1 million killed on both sides. So, and you can see here, of course, President Putin had to go there and speak, bringing up the wonderful Soviet ideals again, desperately trying to feel safe in his own country. And so this is the 80th anniversary of the USSR's victory in the Battle of Stalingrad. A new statue of Stalin was unveiled in the city, very close to the sculpture Going to Heaven, a monument to the victims of Stalin's political repressions from 1917 to 1956. Some street signs were also changed from Volgograd to Stalingrad, back to the dystopian rhetoric from the Soviet Union. You see that new bust of Stalin, one of the most ruthless dictators in history. Just remember, he let his own son die in a gulag. And you can see the Stalingrad sign going up. The city of Volgograd for 1 week, by legislature, for 1 week of the year, is allowed to use on all of their official documents, and for, of course, changing out the signs and everything, can use the hero city of Stalingrad. So that is why they changed the signs to Stalingrad. In fact, they have their own separate stamps and everything, seals and everything for 1 week of the year, because of how major the Battle of Stalingrad was, to be used as the city of Stalingrad. The hero city of Stalingrad is what the official title is. Now, given the situation we continue to find ourselves in, it is a very big question, and as Next to TV asked, it's a big question if that will stay Volgograd or if it will return, considering the sentiments inside of Russia, back to the city of Stalingrad. We jump up here and into Latvia, where traders are bypassing sanctions. So, according to Krišjānis Kariņš, an American Latvian politician and current prime minister of the Republic of Latvia, has stated to the news today, quote, "It seems quite clear that traders are finding ways to legally trade goods, say with Turkey, Kazakhstan, or Armenia, which are then resent to Russia because these countries are not adhering to the sanctions regime." Coming from Reuters, you guys can read more into that. while in Belgrade during discussions in Serbia regarding Kosovo. Members of the Serbian parliament from both the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, SNS, and the opposition came into a physical conflict during debate about the former province of Kosovo and a European proposal to resolve the Serbia-Kosovo relations. MPs confronted each other during President Alexander Vucic's response to an MP's speech. Some opposition MPs approached Vucic, claiming their procedural rights were being violated, after which ruling party MPs approached the opposition, with both sides yelling at each other as Vucic was trying to speak.
Ti Predraže Pantiću, sinu Dejana Pantića, ti Nikola Nedeljkoviću, da je njima ja ovakve divljake nisam vidio, ovo je neverovatno. Sram vas bilo šta radite, sram vas bilo šta radite.
Obviously, some not so great political things happening there in Serbia. We jump down here and into the Middle East, where we start off in Israel, specifically here in the Gaza Strip of Palestine, where Israeli Air Forces end up targeting the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Air Force attacked Palestinian targets in the Gaza Strip. The purpose of the pilots were the shops of the productions of rockets, warehouses of chemicals, and weapons of Hamas. The airstrikes were Tel Aviv's response to the shelling of Israeli territory. And according to updated data, the militants were using 107mm Fajr-1 MLRS rockets produced in 2008 in Iran. The fighters of the brigade Izz ad-Din al-Qassam once again unsuccessfully tried to shoot down Israeli planes using man-pad launchers. See some of those airstrikes coming through here. We can see more footage of those airstrikes coming out. Looks like man-pad and ground fire. And as we move our way up here and into Syria, just across the border, through Jordan, through that little strip of Jordan there, and into Dara, Syria, here in the south, an explosion near the Syrian commander's headquarters occurred the other night on 2/2, so last night. In Dara, there was a powerful explosion near the headquarters of the commander of the security forces associated with Syrian intelligence. Mustafa al-Malsameh recorded, according to the reports, the attack was carried out with a car bomb. Official sources claim that 5 security officials were injured as a result of the explosions. Other reports say that there are many more victims, and among them are dead, including al-Malsameh himself. While up here in Deir ez-Zor province, just across the Euphrates River, in the middle Euphrates River Valley, one person was killed after the PKK opened fire on civilians. Members of the PKK opened fire on protesters demanding the release of citizens from the prisons of the Turkish communists in the city of Asaba. The province, this is located in the province of Deir ez-Zor. As a result of the shooting, a 13-year-old child, Ahmed al-Jada, suffering from Down syndrome, was killed, and another civilian was injured. we jump down here into Southeast Asia. Here in Indonesia, heavy flooding and landslides after a very long amounts of heavy rains. And South Sulawesi and Kalimantan and East Java areas have been hit very heavily by rains and strong winds, leading to flooding and landslides. 2 reported dead following a landslide. An estimated 40,000 persons were affected, and 7,500 houses were damaged. Photos coming out to kind of give you an idea as to what they're dealing with right now when it comes to efforts to try and help these people. And there's more info coming from the reports from the AHA Center and added that, as well as ReliefWeb.international. Coming from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, residents were forced to leave their homes after an attack. Militants burst into settlements and began shooting and set fire to homes. The incidents took place on 31 January and the 1st of February in the Urumu and Mombasa districts of the Ituri province. Residents of the settlements in these districts were forced to leave their homes and seek refuge in regional centers. On February the 2nd, the militants were already noticed in the province of North Kivu, where the country's armed forces were forced to urgently take security measures. The Islamic State itself has yet to claim responsibility for these attacks. It published only photographs taken after the attack of one of the military units of the DRC, and several reports of terrorist attacks in the Ituri province. However, according to the MTO propagandists, 5 people died in them, 4 of whom were security officials. While in Niger, 18 people were killed by unknown militants. 18 people killed and several others were injured in an attack in the province of Tahua. The incident occurred the day before near the border of Mali in the city of Agarak. The victims of the militants were the Tuareg, whose camp was looted and burned by the attackers. Authorities suspect the Islamic State was involved in the attack, but Islamic State sources have yet to take responsibility for the incident. We can get this to load here. Obviously a burned out vehicle there. Unfortunately, we can't always show everything regarding these. There is unfortunately, a lot of gore that YouTube does not play nice with. Jumping across the Atlantic here and into South America, Chile is having a lot of issues with wildfires. Several wildfires are burning across central Chile, affecting multiple regions. 12 active wildfires have been reported as of February the 2nd, burning an area of approximately 1,765 hectares. A red alert for extremely high temperatures has been issued for Nueble, and the fire danger forecast from February 3rd through the 5th ranged from very high to extreme over central Chile. The fire has reportedly led to at least 5 separate deaths. Coming from the official Twitter for NOAA satellites, you see the smoke coming off of these different wildfires here. And coming from weather.com. If you want some more information, you can always check out that weather.com article, or you can also go to ERCC portal. Meanwhile, here in Brazil, hospitals established a hospitals were established to treat acute malnutrition. The Brazilian Health Ministry declared a medical emergency in the Yanomami indigenous territory following reports of children dying of malnutrition and other diseases caused by illegal gold mining. The Ministry of Health has put out a nationwide call for medical professionals to volunteer, while the Army began flying food kits to the Yanomami territory. One hospital was established in the Yanomami community, and another being established in Boa Vista, where the most critical patients have been treated since January the 27th. At least 30 Air Force physicians of different specialties were deployed to take care of patients. Hundreds of Yanomami Yanomami. Adults and children are being treated for diarrhea, malaria, pneumonia, among other conditions that were aggravated by severe malnutrition. The Brazilian president referred to the humanitarian crisis as genocide caused by illegal gold miners, secondary to the neglect of the previous government. This is a Lewis tweet regarding visiting that area. And we have three big developments here in the United States. First one coming from the CIA. The CIA chief has warned against underestimating Xi's ambitions toward Taiwan. Talking about Xi Jinping. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency's, the CIA's director, William Burns, said Thursday that Chinese President Xi Jinping's ambitions toward Taiwan should not be underestimated. Burns said that the United States knew, as a matter of intelligence, that Xi had ordered his military to be ready to conduct an invasion of self-governed Taiwan by 2027. This is not, quote, this does not mean that he has decided to invade in 2027, but it is a reminder of the seriousness of his goals and ambitions. Our conclusions that at the CIA are that I would not underestimate President Xi Jinping's ambitions for Taiwan, end quote. If you'd like more information on that, you can go and check out the Reuters article on that. Meanwhile, coming from Washington, D.C., the newest aid package has been released. The U.S. Department of Defense announced on February the 3rd the newest package for security assistance to Ukraine, including authorization of security assistance valued up to $425 billion, as well as an additional $1.75 billion in Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative, or USAI funds. The package includes ground-launched small-diameter bombs, or GLSDB rockets, that would double Ukraine's strike range to 151 kilometers. Once again, these will put a telephone-sized missile between me and my camera. That is how accurate these things are. Hearing from Alexei Reznikov, of course, giving his big thanks regarding this. And he does give the list here, but we'll just pull that from the U.S. Department of Defense, actual release here. So he says that we're going to have additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, additional 155mm artillery rounds, additional 120mm mortar rounds, 190 heavy machine guns with thermal imagery sights associated with associated ammunition to counter unmanned aerial systems, 181 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs, 250 Javelin anti-armor systems. I can get behind that. 2,000 anti-armor rockets, Claymore anti-personnel munitions, demolitions munitions, cold weather gear, helmets, and other field equipment. And they will also, under USAI, be providing 2 Hawk air defense firing units, anti-aircraft guns with ammunitions, equipment to integrate Western air defense launchers, missiles, and radars with Ukraine's air defense systems, equipment to sustain Ukraine's existing air defense capabilities, air defense generators, counter unmanned aerial systems, 4 air surveillance radars, 20 counter mortar radars, spare parts for counter artillery radars, Puma unmanned aerial systems, which are pretty cool, precision guided munitions, secure communications equipment, so radios, medical supplies, and funding for training, maintenance, and sustainment. The United States has now committed a total of $30 billion since the beginning of the Biden administration. And since 2014, $32 billion, with more than $29.3 billion since the beginning of the invasion on February the 24th. For everyone wondering, where's the camouflage kitty at? Camouflage Kitty is now unhappy with me, but that is Camouflage Kitty. Say hello to the world, Inky. You are now famous on the internet. You can go back to sleep now. It's okay. And coming from the Pentagon, for everyone who's been wondering, what is with the balloons? What is the balloon? Why? What is this about? Well, that's really the question, isn't it? So, of course, the United States and China are not not getting along. We have a lot of increased tensions. But here's the rundown, and then I'll kind of go into it later. A little bit after I get through all of this. So, a suspected Chinese spy balloon was located by NORAD and the Canadian Armed Forces on the 2nd of February. While they stated that the balloon's path will take it over several sensitive sites, including nuclear sites, it is not expected to get any better intelligence than Chinese low Earth orbit satellites. The balloon was reported to be operating between 62 and 65,000 feet. That may have increased to 80,000 feet. That's what I could get from open sources. Well above commercial air traffic, so it would not interfere or endanger anyone flying on civilian flights in the area. Officials ultimately stated that they did not intend to shoot down the balloon, stating that it did not pose a significant increase in threat. The imaging array and equipment suite on board is estimated to roughly be the size of 2 to 3 full-sized school buses, with the actual balloon being significantly larger. So this is not a small weather balloon. This isn't even a big weather balloon. This is gigantic. This is tons of material that is just floating around in American airspace. By shooting down the balloon, it would pose more of a danger to civilians over the very large debris field. They did not, however, rule out shooting it over the Atlantic or the Gulf once it clears the airspace of the United States and no longer poses a threat to anybody. U.S. officials stated they had been tracking for the balloon for some time as it made its way from China across the vast expanses of the Pacific and to the U.S. coast. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the CCP's Foreign Affairs Director Wang Yi, according to the State Department press release, stating that in light of the balloon, the upcoming diplomatic visit to Beijing would not be appropriate. This comes as tensions between the United States and are currently at an all-time high over Taiwan, and recent reports that China is preparing for a large-scale war, possibly with the U.S., no later than 2025. Coming from the United States North American Command and NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, the U.S. government has detected and is tracking a high-altitude surveillance balloon that is over the continental United States right now. North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, continues to track and monitor it closely. NORAD Commander General Glenn Van Herk assesses the balloon does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground at this time. The balloon is currently traveling at altitudes well above commercial air traffic. Coming from the United States Department of Defense, which is also commented on this. And so they said that they immediately acted to prevent any collection of sensitive information. They have plenty of time. And the phone call from the U.S. Department of State regarding with the CCP Director for Central Foreign Affairs Office, Wang Yi. We do have some photos. So this is what it looks. So this is kind of at a distance. You can see just how large that balloon is. Keep in mind, these are very far away because this thing is at 80,000 feet. This is pretty much almost on the cusp of essentially what a satellite is. Not quite in orbit, but not quite, it's way too high up to be a plane, but not high enough quite to have left the atmosphere. Because at that point, the balloon would actually pop. So very difficult to get photos of this, but you can see here some better imaging. You can see just how large. And this sensor array right here is estimated to be the size of about 2 to 3 full-size school buses, is about what they're saying. And this is what it is. So it's a helium-filled balloon with solar panels to provide power and instruments instruments including cameras, radar sensors, and communications equipment that's located there. And then you can see kind of a diagram of just how high it's flying. Commercial airliners fly about 40 to 45,000 feet. And then fighter aircraft will be at about 65,000 feet, as they say here. And then the 80 to 120,000 feet area is where these are at. So here's the part that got very juicy and interesting that I've already seen brought up by Ken Brown much earlier in the stream, and we're coming back to your thing now here. It is unconfirmed. I've checked Montana's official website. I've checked everything, official releases, Department of State, even Canada, which has one of the most god-awful websites I have ever seen of any government in history. Canada, please fix your government website. I can't find anything on it, and I literally spent an hour trying to find a statement, man. What are you doing? Hire somebody else. Anyway, I have a better website. That's not saying much. Anyway, going on through here. While it's unconfirmed, it has been reported that Canadian forces were tracking a second balloon, and that reports of that military aircraft and explosion over Billings, Montana, suggesting a possible shoot down of another balloon. However, there is very little information and no confirmations, but there is supposedly a video. So this is supposedly a video from Billings, Montana, immediately as all of this is happening. Obviously not a lot happening right now. The other balloon did pass over this area in Montana as of yesterday. It was, I think, somewhere over like St. Louis earlier. And I think actually it made its way to Kentucky, so just missed it. So I'm not quite sure. Everyone's kind of trying to track this thing. It's kind of weird. That is the kind of thing that we're seeing. So there's been... it's questionable, right? So it's unconfirmed. All we're seeing is, what we're getting right now, what we had right before the stream. There's not a lot of information to go on. Now, why are these balloons important? What is with the balloons? Who cares? Why is it big? The United States and China are adversaries. We consider them to be a near peer threat, is what we would consider to call them. They are the reason the entire Marine Corps is shifting its focus to shifting back to conducting those amphibious operations after we fought in the giant litter box for so long. So that is the whole point. And the setting up for the island hopping campaign. The whole thing with China is that they are possibly gearing up to fight the United States in a major conflict. Knowing the United States will likely back Taiwan and keep its word, considering how many bases we have around the Pacific at this point, are preparing to engage, could engage and very quickly respond to Chinese trying to take over Taiwan, which we officially see as a separate nation. So that is the whole point in that. That is the whole point of why this is a big deal, is because of historically balloons have been used in the past too. In World War II, actually some civilians up in I can't remember if it's Oregon or Washington, were killed when Japanese launched balloons that carried incendiary munitions that actually landed in a forest while they were having a picnic. Killed a small family. And so that's historically been used before. Satellites you don't really think about. You don't see the satellites really unless you're really looking at a nice clear sky without a lot of light pollution. You really don't see the satellites. You don't think about them. But Chinese spy satellites exist. This isn't expecting to do anything better, but it makes a statement, and they're trying to do something different. Maybe trying to get some close-in observation. No one's hacked into this thing, so no one knows how good it truly is, but just what we can suspect from what's available to us. The balloons are very large, could pose a danger if something goes wrong, and considering the tensions that we're seeing right now and the recent statements that have come out from the CIA and the Department of Defense and members within the military recently over the last few weeks, it makes it very concerning. And you can see even the diplomatic mission was canceled. So that's why. And taking the option of possibly shooting one down, while inherently dangerous, Montana is one of the most least densely populated states in America. And while it would be near Billings, those images that you can see from, from different when you're talking about how far away that could have been floating over the middle of nowhere here in, over by, I don't know, Bozeman or something. Just in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of open land out there. It's the big open spaces. So that's kind of why. That's why there's the tensions, why it's so important, because you can see it. You can see it, you can track it, you can whatever. So that is kind of why you're talking about the interest here. So if there was a shoot down over Big Sky, within sight of Billings, or if you're talking about the one that's currently sitting in, I think, Kentucky now, was the last I heard, going over some of the most sensitive locations in the U.S., missile silos, nuclear installations, what have you. That's what, that's kind of the whole point there, is they're trying to gain intelligence. They're actively, physically, you can see them being an adversary. They're taking some kind of action. We're not flying balloons over China. We are using our satellites and things like that. Or, well, I don't know what they have now, because the SR-71's been decommissioned for a long time, and the U-2 spy plane is too, but, whatever we're doing, it's not something that the whole world is knowing about, is kind of the whole point of that. So it is a big deal. It's very provocative when you're talking about geopolitics to do something like that. It's very provocative, especially in very tense situations already. And so with that, that is the last of the hard-hitting news, but we're going to try and end the night on a good note. I hope that answers your questions. Sorry, there was one question that I did not answer that actually came through from Ken Brown, and he says, could the balloons be used for bouncing off radio waves for enemy forward command centers communications? What if there were many balloons? There could be many balloons. We have the one, possibly the two. There could be a whole bunch sitting in the ocean. No one's going to tell us about these things until they actually get to the U.S. and someone notices it. That's just the reality of how intelligence works. For all we know, they could have launched 100 of them and 98 of them popped. So it's possible. But could they be used for forward ending command centers and stuff like that? They're likely not going to see communications raised for forward enemy command centers, and satellite communications would be encrypted satellite communications would be a lot better, just because of the technology that's available. Balloons are, really outdated. There's just no two ways around it. This is, even the U.S. admitted, the Chinese are getting either equally as good, if not better, satellite imagery of our very important nuclear sites than any of these balloons would ever get. Their satellites are getting much better images, or could be getting much better images than their balloon is getting. So why did they send it in the first place is kind of the question I think that everyone has, is why. Because it doesn't sound like it was advantageous, just provocative. Which could have been the point. So, we have a couple of different points here. I'm going to start off with Antarctica so I don't forget it, because I have a habit of doing that when something is in the southern hemisphere. A 17-pound meteorite was found in Antarctica. Scientists recently scooped one of the heaviest meteorites ever discovered in Antarctica, as well as 4 other frozen space rocks that likely crashed into the icy continent thousands of years ago. Researchers found a mini horde of meteorites on the surface of the Nils Larsen Blue Ice Zone near the Belgian-owned Princess Elizabeth Arctic Ice Station. One of the 5 meteorites, the standout was the cantaloupe-sized rock that weighed a whopping 16.7 pounds or 7.6 kilograms. Meteorite samples collected during the expedition have been sent to the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels to be properly thawed and analyzed, but each expedition scientist also took back samples of potential meteorite dust, which they collected around the fallen space rocks for their own research. That is the 17-pound space rock that is currently jammed into the world's largest thing of ice. If you would like some more information on that, please feel free to check out livescience.org. And that is the Space Research Center, I guess. It does not have very good imagery. I do apologize. I also apologize for my cats who are deciding to go crazy in the background. Xenocide being very provocative in his statements. World War III has already begun. People buckle up. I don't think so. You would know. We would all know. I wouldn't be doing a stream right now if that was the case. So I'm sure we're fine. And in Carlisle, here in the United Kingdom, a stockpile of 2,000-year-old gemstones was found in a Roman bathhouse drain. Archaeologists recently uncovered a stockpile of 2,000-year-old glittering gemstones clogged in the drain of a Roman bathhouse near Hadrian's Wall in Carlisle, England. The 30 engraved semi-precious stones were likely dropped out of the ring settings worn by bathers who took to the water sometime during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Frank Geico, the archaeologist who led the excavation, described the gems as minuscule. The smallest measured about 0.2 inches in diameter or 5 millimeters, while the largest topped out at 0.6 inches or 16 millimeters. In addition to the gemstones, archaeologists uncovered 40 women's hairpins and 35 glass beads during the excavation. These are the gemstones that they're talking about. Not very big. These are literally worn on rings and amulets. If you would like some more information on that, there is the Live Science article for y'all. Well, there we go. Xenocide21 asks, well, this might be true, but would you sign back up for service if World War III was official? You know, I wouldn't. And to tell you why, I saw a lot of things on my 2 deployments to the Middle East. Saw a lot of things that weren't, that I don't think anyone should really need to see. Stuff that troubles me, quite extensively to this day. And makes it very hard to sleep at night. Makes it very hard. A lot of questions that I still have to answer for myself. And I'm proud of a lot of things I did, right? And I'm proud of a lot of things I did there and for my service and everything. But between Iraq and Syria especially, which it was the worst of the 2, was my first one, I've just had enough of it. I've had enough of the whole war thing. I grew up fascinated with war and conflict, death, and all of that wonderful stuff that comes with war in the military. I grew up fascinated by it, loved it, got picked on in school for it. And then I went and I joined the Marine Corps and became a Marine. And you think you know and you think you've seen everything, no matter how many real videos or footage or movies or whatever you watch, documentaries, it doesn't matter. There's nothing that really prepares you for it. And so I went to really experience it, to know, I was part of really the end of the war on terror, properly, the war on terror. There's still operations and stuff going on, and there are certainly guys that will disagree with me that went through similar or worse experiences, but for me personally, it was enough. I simply don't have the taste for it anymore. I'm proud of getting to do what I got to do. I'm proud of working with the people I got to work with and some of the things I got to do when I was deployed, but there are definitely things that weren't worth it. And there's a lot of things that war is very terrible. And I talk about it more openly than I think a lot of people do, because I think it needs to be known just how bad it is, because a lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people don't talk about those experiences. And personally, if you don't talk about it, people will never learn about it, how bad it really is. So we'll just keep doing it. It's a lot of suffering that doesn't need to happen. So complete and utter total waste of human life and potential. That's it. Now, as for Irva says, thought Paul is not in active service. I am not in active military service. I am in what is called the IRR, or an inactive ready reserve. I actually recently just got some orders that I have to go carry out in April, so we will not be streaming on a. Yeah, so I got some orders to go do some stuff. We will not be streaming on a Saturday in April, to say the least. Nothing big, nothing major, but I am still technically in the Marine Corps, as a Marine. So I am still in the Marine Corps. I still am a corporal in the Marine Corps. I just am in inactive ready reserve, meaning if something were to happen, I could be recalled for a mobilization order. Now, that is extremely unlikely considering how many there are, but it is a thing. So it is something I have to worry about. It's something I have to think about when things are happening. It's something that actually, that's why I watched the Security Council meeting on February 24th. That's why I watched it. So, because I was concerned. My thought wasn't with what was going on in Ukraine initially. My thought is, am I going to get recalled? So that was the whole point. And then this, obviously has changed quite a bit since then. But, so, yeah. But no, I hope that's a good answer. I hope that answers your question. But that is why I don't have a taste for it anymore. I'm good at my job. I'm good at, and I'd be able to teach a lot of people a lot of very useful things, but there's a lot of other guys that I think are probably in a better mentality to do that. But with that wraps up tonight's news, and that wraps up everything here on TNN for tonight. I hope that everyone has learned something and has found that this is knowledgeable. I hope that you guys will take maybe some of the bad experiences that I talk about, or in the news that you're hearing here and firsthand accounts, to be able to do something good. Because, like I said, there's a lot of bad things that are happening when it comes to this. It's a lot of things that don't need to happen, but are. And a lot of people are affected by it. Not just myself, but plenty of other people and throughout the world too. A lot of people in Ukraine, for instance. A lot of internally displaced people. A lot of people that are suffering for things that they have no control over. So please be sure to check out the video description below and donate to the wonderful organizations in that description. Checking out, whether you're talking about the war, supporting the war effort for the Ukrainians, or providing humanitarian aid, or providing humanitarian aid for the people in Ethiopia and Somalia and Kenya, or obviously some relief efforts in Indonesia for those landslides and flooding or what have you. There's stuff spanning the entire globe. Please be sure 70% or more of the donations they receive go to their programs, go to helping people, with 30% or less going to things like salaries and administration's costs. The point here is to be the news that goes back and to help people, and so that's what we vet for. And with that, I hope that you and your friends and your family remain safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. My name is Paul from the New News, and we will be back live tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central, for a 24 hours of news and review. Until then, you have a fantastic rest of your night, and I'll see you then, everybody. All right, bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок, вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй, хто працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Идите нахуй!